Hey folks, I know I am just an ordinary guy telling stories, but please leave a like and subscribe before we start. Let's enjoy today's story. Before I dive into today's story, I want to say a disclaimer. The content presented here is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. It was the kind of night that makes small things feel important, not dangerous, exactly just decisive. I was driving home after a long week, headlights slicing through a low mist, when my car hiccuped and died on Hawthorne Road. The fuel gauge stuck cold at E. No bars on my phone, the radio coping with only the faintest hiss. Hawthorne was the stretch that cut across old farmland and dense wood. Locals called it a shortcut. Tourists called it scenic, and anyone who'd lived there more than a few months called it lonely. I dragged my bag out. Onto the shoulder, the cold settling through my jacket. The fog smelled like wet leaves and motor oil. My plan was simple. Walk to the next town, find a gas station, figure out the rest in daylight. There was a street lamp 100 yards ahead, flickering like a heartbeat. I told myself that if I could make it to that circle of light, I'd be fine. We tell ourselves things like that when we need a story to keep walking the road. Underfoot was loose gravel. Each step made a small noise that the fog swallowed. The trees leaned close to the asphalt, fingers of branches knitting overhead so the sky looked like a ceiling. As I approached the lamp, I saw someone standing beneath it. At first I thought relief. Then I realized how wrong relief looked when it had shoulders that slanted wrong and a neck that seemed too long. It stood like a weathered coat on a hook, motionless, the light haloing it into a silhouette. I slowed. My pulse tapped against my ears. The lamp buzzed and then died, plunging the road into a velvet black. For a second I could hear only the wind. Then the lamp popped back and the figure had moved closer. Not by footsteps. It had simply been somewhere else taped to the night, and then it was nearer. As if distance itself had slipped, I'd turned to run back to the car, a useless thought because the road behind me was longer than the trail ahead. That's when another lamp flared on down the road, and another figure stood beneath it. It crouched, head cocked, as if listening. I understood in that instant that these weren't random people. The lamps were markers, and the markers were moving. Me like a bead along a string. I tried to be clever. I walked in the middle of the road, refusing to stay in the pools of light. I thought the darkness could hide me. That lasted until one of the lamps blazed to life and showed me a figure right at the edge of the black, there where I'd been standing seconds before. It raised a hand not to wave, but to point, a slow, deliberate motion that felt like instruction. The pointing hand made my skin crawl. It suggested that whatever stood there had a plan after an unbearably long time of moving, stopping, and testing the spaces between lights. I stumbled into a small clearing where the lamps ended. At its center stood a battered wooden post with an old plaque welded to it. The metal read, Hawthorne Memorial Highway, dedicated to those lost, 1973. Someone had tacked photographs to the post, Polaroids and yellowed snaps. Faces frozen mid-breath, smiles caught and never released. Each photo had been shot under a lamp. The same ring of light I'd been following. I mouthed the names written in shaky ink on the margins. Their faces were a jumble of strangers until I noticed the repeated pattern. Each photo showed a person looking straight at the camera, alarm reflected in their eyes. The hair and clothes changed, but the expression didn't. And then, tucked in the bottom corner, was an image that made my teeth go cold. A snapshot of me, taken from a distance. I recognized, standing under a street lamp with that same ridiculous, startled look on my face. I hadn't taken it. The timestamp on the back, when I squinted at the faded marks, was from that very night. Don't remember deciding to take the photo of the board. I think my fingers just did it. My hands shook so badly the flash smeared the image into a smear of white. When I stepped back from the post, the lamp above me sputtered and went out. For a moment, I embraced the darkness like a blanket. Then a whisper of movement off the road told me it was not safety I'd returned to. What followed was a slow, exquisite nightmare of rationalizations and raw animal fear. I tried logic at first. Someone had been out here before me. The board was an old memorial. The photo of me had been snapped by some unseen camera rigged to the trees. Reason, though offerable, failed to fill the gaps. When I walked back toward the car, the lamps continued, their choreography itch blaze, showing a new figure. Each dark stretch between them containing a sound that might have been a footstep, might have been a branch, might have been my racing heartbeat camped near the car, as if the presence of metal and glass could make a barrier. I wrapped blankets around my legs and did my best to ignore how the lamps seemed to beat in time with my breath. My phone remained stubbornly dead. The night thinned into a long, cold shoreline of little noises, the hum of insects, the far-off hoot of an owl that seemed too loud and too lonely. Around 2 in the morning, a chill that wasn't weather made me check the rearview mirror. In its dark glass, I saw the glow of a lamp, one that should have been a quarter-mile back, flare and illuminate the edge of the field. A shadow moved. There, big and slow. And then the light went out. At some point, I realized I was whispering to myself out of habit, rehearsing answers to questions I knew I couldn't explain. I thought of all the roads I'd taken in life, the wrong turns layered into a map of small regrets. For the first time in years, I felt small and accountable. Panic is useful at first. It gets you moving. But after a while, it becomes weight, slows you down. I tried to be practical. Stay awake, stay warm, stay hopeful. Dawn was an argument between light and fog. When the sun finally thinned the mist, more of Hawthorne showed itself to be wrong in little ways. The grass was flattened into paths that shouldn't have been there. The ground around the lotion of lamps was scuffed like the tracks of many shoes. The car started on the second try, a coughing, shivering machine that coughed me awake enough to drive. I told myself to go home, to leave Hawthorne in the rearview, to tell the tale as something that could be amusing over beers the next day. The photograph on the board tugged at me like a loose thread, and I couldn't leave it. Not a die. Stopped at a diner in the next town and ordered coffee that came out of a machine so old it tasted of reread histories. The waitress, a woman with permanent grease on her palms and sideways empathy in her smile, looked at me as if she'd seen me before. There it was again, that premonitory tilt of the head. I bought it coffee, a sugar packet, and the mere sliver of comfort and the hum of other people. I asked her if Hawthorne Road had always been called that. She laughed a little, stirred her coffee. Hawthorne, that's the road people avoid. Haven't you heard about the memorial? Folks put photos up sometimes. Wishful thinking, I guess. They say the lamps show up when you need to be reminded. Keeps the town gossip going. Asterisk show up? I asked. She shrugged. They say the lights come out for those who get lost. They say the people who get taken wind up on that board. People here, they respect it a little. Keep their doors shut. I told myself this was local folklore, a folklore version of a memory people needed for closure. But hours later, when I scrolled through my camera roll in the motel and saw the board photo again, the one with the blurry flash, and the woman's face pointedly familiar, felt something colder than superstition. The images of the board spread, like a blotter, into everything I did. Strangers on the internet had suggestions. Cameras, pranks, optical illusions. One comment, though, slid under the rest like ink. If you see your face on Hawthorne Memorial, they said, don't turn your back on the road. I slept badly, dreamt of lights blooming like tumors across a map. At noon, I told myself I was done. I drove back to the interstate, to the flow of cars and the assumption of movement. The world hurried on, indifferent, until my dashboard lit with a message I didn't expect. My phone, which had been dead, blinked, with a single incoming image from an unknown number. It was a photo of my apartment living room, taken in the blue hour before dawn. My couch empty, a lamp on by the window, and in the reflection on the glass tiny and cruelly out of focus though. Square shape of a street lamp, and the silhouette of a person whose head was angled in that particular, listening way. The number that sent it. Unknown. The metadata. Taken minutes earlier. The more I tried to fold these facts into a neat explanation, the more they refused. I blocked the number and thought that would be the end of it. It was not the end of it over. The next week small. Things accumulated. The neighbor's cat stared at the corner of my kitchen at 3 a.m. and wouldn't move. Lamps at the end of my street would blink in a rhythm that felt like Morse code for some private sorrow. My mug went missing and reappeared on the windowsill facing the road, exactly where it hadn't been seconds before. I started to test reality, out of spite. I left doors open, lights off, phones on the kitchen table. I filmed as much to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind as to trap whatever would show up. The recordings, when I watched them, were maddeningly normal. I slowed them down. Tiny distortions would ripple at the edges of reflections, like heat waves. In the footage of my front window, an odd square would appear in the glass for a fraction of a second, an inset that showed a lamplit road and a head turned toward. Camera. Sometimes there was a hand raised. I told a friend, a man who believed in practical solutions. He drove out with his truck and a pile of equipment and joked all the way there about ghost hunting shows. I wanted to laugh with him. We set up lights and tripods and a generator and left the road humming, instruments eating the silence like wolves. He slept in the car and I stayed awake, cigarette and coffee and fear as my company. We thought cameras would either catch something explainable or nothing at all. Instead, at 2 a.m., the generator tripped off with a soft, insistent click, and every lamp along Hawthorne sputtered to life in a slow wave. My friend swore and groped for the keys. When he flung the truck door open, the beam of his flashlight fell on the board. 20-odd photos, a new one at the bottom. It was a grainy image of me, with the flashlight's glare turned mouthless over the dark. Under it, someone had scribbled in thick black marker, "We watch, we remember, come back someday." He wanted to drive. He wanted to leave, to haul me into the truck and burn every mile away from the place. But before we could, a shape detached from the road and stood in front of the headlights, taller than any human should be, shoulders loose like a coat on a peg. It didn't run or move like a predator. It tilted its head and raised one hand in a wave so small and polite, it felt like a courtesy. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, the figure was gone. The board's newest photo fluttered in the cold, like a handkerchief. The generator clicked back to life, and the lights went dark, as though someone had turned the world off and on to check my pulse. We left that night, my friend swearing he'd never come back. He dropped me with a promise that sounded less like comfort, and more like a line dividing decisions: get help or get alone. He drove off, and the taillights blinked down the road, like a promise that I might be spared. I thought about reporting the board to someone, to the county, but every scrap of rationality I could muster told me that filing a paper wouldn't change the fact that something had found me and preferred to show me the courtesy of a wave. Days became a smear of small anxieties. I changed my routine. I avoided mirrors and reflections when I could. I took different roads, never the Hawthorne shortcut. I would have loved to say that distance made it fade, that the world would reassert itself with the comforting law of normalcy. Instead, I found the photo of my apartment window on my porch one morning, unsigned, dry, despite the rain the night before. In the reflection on the glass, tucked in the corner like a punctuation mark, a lamplight pulsed. I still don't know what Hawthorne Road is, or why it chooses whom to remind. Maybe it's a geography of grief, a place that collects faces like a deck of used cards. Maybe it's a trick of long memory turned collective photos, wishful thinking, pranks, and the human habit of pattern making finally giving birth to something hungry. I can't say. What I can say is this: I stopped checking the board. I stopped going there. But once in a while, when I pass a street lamp and it flickers just so, my shoulders tense. I find myself glancing to the windows of houses and wondering, who looks back? Sometimes I dream of a roadside pinned full of smiling strangers, and my face pasted among them. And when I wake, I hold the sheets like a shield. If you made it this far, if you stayed until the end, then maybe you're one of those people who enjoys the small, slow horrors that refuse to tie up neatly. If you managed to stay with me through all of that, do me a favor, leave a like and subscribe. And if you ever find a photograph of yourself under strange light, maybe tuck it away.